Hello, friends, family, students. I want to discuss how to watch election night without freaking out. Now, the best way not to freak out is if your preferred candidate wins quickly. But since we can't know that, I want to explain how to ignore the noise and keep your eye on what's important. Now, we may not know the winner on Tuesday night, and it may even end up coming down to days or weeks of litigation, in which case, go ahead and freak out. But the way to avoid that is a decisive win by a candidate and/or early wins in certain key states. So let's talk about snakes and tennis. This is the snake diagram from 538.com. It simply ranks the 50 states, D.C., and the congressional districts in Maine and Nebraska in order from most heavily Trump-leaning to most Biden-leaning. Now, that's just their best guess based on polling and the demographics of the states. For our purposes, it doesn't have to be right, it just has to be close, and it probably will be. Now, the red and blue on the diagram are 538's predictions, but we know predictions can be wrong, so let's ignore that for now. We can still use this to understand the results as each state is announced in a way that the TV networks never quite seem to communicate clearly. Now, to do this, we need to take a quick detour into the rules of tennis. Tennis matches are divided into sets, which are in turn divided into games. Now, the players alternate serving by game. So I'll serve for an entire game, then my opponent serves the next game, and so on. Now, if you win a game in which you serve, that's called holding serve. But if you win a game in which your opponent served, then you've broken their serve. Now, if the players are evenly matched, they will hold serve most of the time. That makes the act of breaking your opponent's serve the single most important thing you can do to gain the lead and eventually win the set. And in fact, if I'm ahead 3 games to 2, but I've served all 3 games that I won, then I'm not really ahead. But if I lead 3-2 because I broke their serve once and they didn't break me, then I'm genuinely ahead. And if no one has a break advantage and the set reaches 6-6, then it goes to a tiebreaker. Now let's go back to the snake. This line through the middle represents the 270 electoral votes a candidate needs to win. Now, I want you to think of it this way. Every state below the line is Biden's serve, and every state above it is Trump's serve. If they win a state on their side, they have merely held serve, and you shouldn't factor that into your understanding of who's ahead. Now, what if they hold serve all night, meaning they win every state on their side? Well, then they go to a tiebreaker, which in this year's match is known as Pennsylvania. And by unfortunate coincidence, Pennsylvania will likely be one of the later states called because its laws don't allow mail-in votes to be processed before Election Day. And in fact, some of the counties have indicated they won't start counting mail ballots until Wednesday. So if the candidates hold serve in the other states, we won't know the winner on election night. Now, to make this more precise, I transposed the snake onto a map. I made one small change. I moved Nebraska's 2nd congressional district from Trump to Biden, because doing that gives us a tied map, 259-259, with Pennsylvania as the tiebreaker. Now think about the networks calling each state. Polls close roughly from east to west, with some variation within each time zone. It is highly likely that Biden will jump to an early electoral vote lead by holding serve in Vermont, Massachusetts, Delaware, New Jersey, New York, Maryland, while Trump will have early calls in fewer states, like South Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, but don't read anything into that. No one is ahead unless they break serve or win Pennsylvania. Now, each time a candidate breaks serve, they are now ahead by the number of electoral votes in that state. Now, this shouldn't happen often unless it's a blowout or unless the polling error varies by region. So the first candidate to do this, even once or twice, will be in a commanding position. For example, let's say Michigan is called for Trump. Then he's now ahead by 16 votes. Biden could conceivably make that up by winning Arizona and North Carolina, but remember the ordering on the snake. It's not impossible that Biden could win states up here while losing states down here, but the odds are low unless the polls are really misreading the regional patterns. On the other hand, if Biden wins Florida early, then Democrats can start chilling the champagne. Or if he takes North Carolina, it's not over, but the odds shift dramatically in his favor. So that's how to know who's ahead in the race as states are called. But equally important, I want to caution you against reading the tea leaves while we're waiting for the state calls. Remember, if the race is close, there's a good chance we won't know the winner on election night. I know that's frustrating because the stakes are so high, but patience and the ability to separate what we truly know from mere speculation is a key to getting through this. One of the most unnecessarily stress-inducing election night habits is watching the votes slowly come in batches of dozens or hundreds, and watching one candidate take the lead in a state with 40% of precincts reporting, and then the other one leaping ahead with 43% reporting. Don't do that. Yes, other things equal, you want your candidate ahead in the count, and you want the states they're supposed to win to be called before their opponents' must-win states. But other things aren't equal this year. There are always several factors at work here, and COVID has made it much more complicated. Each state has a different combination of election day votes, early in-person votes, and mail-in votes, and different rules for when they get processed and counted. Plus, as usual, votes come from urban and rural precincts at different times, and the sequence varies by state. So unless you have precise information on all of those things, you shouldn't read anything into what's being called win or who's ahead in a state's ongoing tally. Now, the best expert guesses, and these are only guesses, is that some key states will exaggerate Democratic performance early and then Republicans will catch up. So that's Florida, North Carolina, Texas, Ohio, while in others, Republicans will start strong and Democrats will make late gains. So Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota, and by late, I mean possibly days later. Say if you're a Democrat looking for an early knockout through Florida, North Carolina, or Texas, it could happen, but be aware that their early counts might be too favorable to Biden. Or if things are looking more like 2016 and it's coming down to Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, don't freak out if Trump takes a big lead in those states. And of course, the inverse if you're a Republican. So really, you should ignore the raw counts and wait patiently for the states to be called. The network projections, by the way, are determined by teams of statisticians and social scientists with access to all of the data and with a bias toward caution, so they won't be wrong. We just don't know when they'll come. But if you can't wait for that, there are smart folks on the internet with the data who will be doing their best to make sense of it in real time and give the most sophisticated guesses as to what's happening. They have varying degrees of caution, so buyer beware. I'm not sure who all will be blogging or tweeting in high volume, but 538 always has a live blog. Nate Cohn of the New York Times, the one who traumatized Democrats 4 years ago with his needle, will be at it again. And he always has user-friendly, interactive graphics. Dave Wasserman of the Cook Report is one of the best in the business, and surely he'll be tweeting. The website called Decision Desk HQ typically aggregates returns faster than anyone else. And of course, I'll be monitoring all of that and updating our game of snake tennis on my Facebook feed. Well, good luck to your candidate.